for us all, and occasions like this give us a chance to engage and talk about what's happening in your different countries, the state of play, and ideas that seem to work better for legislators and for public representatives in the different countries. So there's some of the issues in relation to our presidency. We've got to put in place the architecture now to prevent future crisis and to plan for future growth. President Van Rompuy, and what he calls the 4 keys to unlock recovery, he stressed the urgent need to progress the EMU on a number of fronts. On financial stability, the important steps taken by the ECB under President Draghi and the commitments made at the European Council last June mean a period of relative calm continues. That doesn't mean that there's any room for complacency or any time to be lost in moving on here. So we're very clear, arising from the decision of the 29th of June last year, to break the link between sovereign debt and bank debt, and banking union therefore is absolutely crucial and critical to this. Economic resilience can only be improved through sound public finances and improved competitiveness. Economic and monetary union has to be strengthened. This includes delivering on banking union, but of course strengthening EMU is more than just about banking. In our presidency, we have supported President Van Rompuy in his consultations on economic policy coordination, on competitiveness and on solidarity, and of course on the social dimension of what he says. All of this needs more work, all of this needs more time. It is an ambitious agenda, and we need to be very clear about the direction that we have plotted for ourselves for the future. Of course, there is the fundamental question of democratic legitimacy and accountability, which is where you and COSAC have an important contribution to make. The European Council has recognised that stronger economic governance arrangements need to be supported by stronger democratic legitimacy and by clearer public accountability. I think we all stand for that. Early in our presidency, Ministers for European Affairs discussed this very issue here in Dublin. Ministers strongly supported greater efforts to strengthen the links between citizens and decisions taken at European level, and they also clearly recognised the need to respect, and I mean to respect, the role of national parliaments in all of this. We can agree on these things, but what is needed now are the concrete steps to deliver and follow through on those outcomes. Your discussions this week are a valuable input, if I might say, into that debate and to the work currently continuing with President Van Rompuy. Let me finish here with a positive message for you. I happen to be very optimistic about the future of Europe. We still have much to do, and growth in the immediate term remains elusive for most. But the last year and the most important measures agreed by the European Union since January add up to the major building blocks for securing stability and for stabilising the growth and the jobs that we all need. I'd like to take this opportunity to record my thanks to the representatives of the many member states and the EU institutions here for this excellent legislative partnership which we have enjoyed as presidency. When you look ahead the next 20 years and you see the impact of China and Japan and India and the movement of the phenomenal populations in the Far East, Africa, the next 20 years, economically and population-wise, will be a very different continent. And clearly, the moves now being made by the United States, particularly in terms of energy, will mean that the geopolitics of the Middle East and the Far East will change as a consequence of the US becoming an independent energy exporting country. And that means that we also recognise that 90% of the world's trade will be conducted outside the borders of the European Union in the next decade, which means that the trading connections that we have with the Far East, with Japan, with Canada, with the US, also the requirement to get our own houses in order here, mean that Europe and the United States, as the two greatest trading blocs on the planet, can set standards for global trade for the period ahead. This is a challenging position for all our countries. It's also a position of great excitement. And as a believer in politics, I like to see that the decisions being made by the Council are followed through. Thank you all for your cooperation during our presidency. We still have a deal to do this week with a number of very important meetings, and hopefully we can conclude the MFF by the European Council meeting on Thursday, Friday. Hope you enjoy your stay in Dublin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach, for your presentation here this morning. Now, we have a lot of people indicating that they'd like to ask questions, and we have limited time, so I'm going to try to get through as many people as possible, but I do need your help. If you do want to put questions down, please submit them to the Secretariat and they'll come up here. But we have quite a number already in. I'm going to ask people to limit their contributions to 1 minute so that as many people as possible can get in. I will take a response from the Taoiseach after every 5 questions. So the first questioner is from Italy, Mr. Paolo Tancredi.
Grazie Presidente, condivido.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I share the Taoiseach's optimism, but perhaps there's a bit of a clash with the title of the session. We need to do more to work towards government of the Union. The most recent decisions have only been partially implemented in an asymmetrical way. We have the two-pack and measures taken to strengthen and stabilize public finances. However, we're working very slowly on moving towards banking union and a framework to coordinate economic policies because of resistance from certain member states. Just a few weeks ago, there was a compromise on the creation of EU supervision.
Can you very, very quickly make your point and then I'll move on very quickly.
Problema posto.
Vabbè, comunque la questione è chiara, cioè c'è la simmetria sulla stabilità, si fa tutto subito, sul resto. Se tu
No,
vuoi.
forse dovevamo dire qualcosa sulla vicinanza.
Okay, we'll move on to the second speaker, Mr. Antonio Rodriguez from Portugal, and you have 1 minute.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Presidente, caros colegas, Sr. Primeiro-Ministro.
Thank you, Chairman, colleagues, Taoiseach. First of all, the example that Ireland has provided when it comes to cooperation and really trust has been fantastic. Over the last few years, Europe has had a series of positive examples. A crisis is not the end of the road. The situation in Europe is not perfect. We need more growth. We need to be more efficient and efficiency and so on, especially during an economic crisis. But there was also a crisis in trust, and that is a key issue in European development. We know that there's an understanding between national parliaments and the European Parliament. It's also a question of personal trust. We see that people are turning their backs on Europe, and we need to be very careful. We need the support of people. My second comment, solidarity. One for all and all for one. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is from Slovenia, Mr. Joseph Horvat.
Thank you. Taoiseach, Chair, colleagues. After the onset of the economic and financial crisis in Europe, most of the measures taken at the national European level were mainly adopted to put out the fire, if I can say so. And the banking union was such an instrument. But the fact is that in the future, we will have similar crises. So I would like to know whether the Irish presidency thinks that all the implementing steps for the banking union are going in the right direction, because it is focusing mainly on private capital to finance the restructuring costs for banks in the future. So it is not clear at this stage whether we will get this money from the financial transaction tax or some other form of financial participation. I am personally convinced that in the end, the consumers will foot the bill, our citizens. I'm asking this because I'm not entirely convinced whether the banking union contains all the instruments necessary to implement this properly, despite all the pressures. Thank you.
The next speaker is from Hungary, Mr. Richard Korzik.
Thank you, the floor, Mr. Chairman. Dear Mr. Prime Minister, first of all, let me congratulate for the successful Irish presidency. As far as the economic monetary union is concerned, as you mentioned, let me reaffirm that Hungary is interested in a strong and viable Eurozone. It is quite evident that a new quality of the Eurozone has been taking shape due to the decision to reinforce the economic and monetary union. Mr. Prime Minister, we think that for the non-Eurozone countries, the possibility to get involved on equal terms into the practical creation of a banking union is really important. Hungary has constructively contributed to the debate so far, and encouragingly some of our ideas are already incorporated into the drafts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Gediminas Kirkalis from Lithuania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Taoiseach, for the very interesting and useful speech. And I believe that our cooperation in Troika with your country very successful. We are taking over this presidency and believe that we will cooperate in the future also successfully. Prime Minister, please say you know of course that in Lithuania have to be create new parliamentary body on the so-called Article 13. Can you shortly to what is your expectation on this body and probably content of discussion there? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Taoiseach.
I'm glad you share the optimism that we have for the union here. Banking union is clearly critical to all of this. As I said, I'd like to see that where decisions are made by the European Council, the elected leaders and heads of government, that they're actually followed through. Important decisions have been made there. The presidency has made good progress, and it's very important that we conclude this job. The 29th of June last year, the decision was made, and that decision needs to be followed through to be fully in place. That decision was to break the link between sovereign debt and bank debt with the possibility of recapitalisation under the ESM. We have the single supervisory mechanism put in place. Now we need to move on to banking resolution and recovery. This is actually under discussion last weekend and again this week. Very difficult and very complex. It's going to come again on Wednesday, and we can hope that we can conclude that. Respective question number 2 was about trust and solidarity. I actually believe this is fundamental. You cannot engage at political level unless there's a sense of trust and understanding. But the makeup of the European Union can actually be quite complex here. In the course of a presidency, you might be dealing with 3 or 4 different new prime ministers, and every minister down the line dealing with the respective areas in finance or whatever, energy or whatever it might be, because of changes in government and elections that take place in different countries, and that obviously creates a problem. But this is the year of the citizen. It is about having an ongoing dialogue. But I have to say that I sat at the European Council meetings in the first period of this government, and clearly there were decisions being made that people did not believe in, and neither did the markets. So it is a case of unfolding all the layers to know exactly what the nature and scale of the problem is, and then follow through on it. Where's the money for banking union going to come from? Well, the 29th of June decided to break that link between sovereign and bank debt, that you shouldn't have a situation where the taxpayer, as happened in this country, became the place of first resort to have to bail out the banks. And I'm glad that a hierarchy is now being put in place for bail-ins, which will deal with that, and hopefully that for the future, that with the tools and the mechanisms that are now in place, what happened here won't happen elsewhere. Clearly, given the circumstances that applied, the citizens here had to borrow 64 billion and were required, as a consequence, to pay for it. Now we've had assistance from our European colleagues in terms of an agreement with the ECB, extension of maturity dates for loans, reductions in interest rates. We still have the issue of the train wreck economically that occurred a number of years ago, and that's why banking union is of such importance in terms of the where we're headed. The question from Hungary, I agree with this. The non-Eurozone meeting should be included. We have supported that, and as presidency, we were involved in seeing that was moved forward. In respect of Lithuania, well, good luck to you with your presidency. I hope that we'll have a number of the other matters cleared away for you by the time you take it over. The views on the new Article 13 conference, what are our expectations for this? I think it's a good idea. We will support the inter-parliamentary conference here, which is on stability and trust. I think that these are fundamental. We can't make progress unless we have these things.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. The next questioner is Ms. Anna Burchell from Romania.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Felicităm președinția irlandeză pentru succesele.
We would like to congratulate the Irish presidency for a very successful presidency, and we appreciate the alignment with the European Commission on the multi-annual financial framework. We regret the political pressure exerted by the media in certain member states on its own citizens, but also on Romania and Bulgaria on a supposed wave of immigrants after 2014. And we would like to express the hope that the member states where these media campaigns take place will meet the commitments they took in accordance with the treaties. As for Romania and Bulgaria's accession to the Schengen area, we believe that the Irish presidency was an honest broker, and to Romania, accession to the Schengen area is a priority, and we express hope that the Lithuanian presidency will intensify political efforts and appreciate the efforts made by Romania and Bulgaria and the European Union to have a favorable decision by the end of the year. Thank you.
Much. The next speaker is Mr. Luboš Blaha from Slovakia.
Ďakujem pekne. Slovensko je stabilný člen eurozóny a...
Thank you very much. Our government supports further integration in the European Union, and we support solidarity. I think that the social crisis is a huge challenge for Europe. The democratic model is under threat, and poverty is on the increase. Unilateral austerity policy is not the right solution to the problem. And this policy is counter to growth and increasing purchasing power of citizens. The citizens do not believe in Europe any longer. What do you feel? Do you feel that Europe has a chance with this austerity policy?
Speaker is Mr. Epaminondas Marias from Greece.
I would like to thank the Taoiseach for his comments and for the hospitality, of course, your hospitality here in Ireland. The issues you've raised, democratic legitimacy, are extremely important. Who decides, after all, for the destinies of people? Is it governments, national parliaments, the European Parliament? I believe that the Lisbon Treaty does cover these issues. It did initially, but now a serious issue is arising in those countries that are under the Troika and the memorandum. I imagine that the Irish Prime Minister and our friends here, Irish MPs, must have the same experience. The Troika decides on the fate of the Greek people, and they take decisions. This is a serious issue, and it's in conflict with democratic legitimacy. We need to take a position on this, because it's not possible to have Troika overturn democratic legitimacy, and most of all, we cannot allow them to break EU treaties themselves. So what is happening in practice is that the EU needs to safeguard its own functioning and isolate the Troika.
From France is Monsieur Pierre Lequier.
Oui, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Taoiseach, could I start by congratulating you on the Irish presidency? Some excellent results. But I'll be talking about the obviously the economic side of things, but also what's politically at stake, because a few months into the future there'll be the European elections, and we have to face facts. European citizens find it harder and harder to understand Europe. As we make progress, we're losing the citizens' understanding, and so in coming months, in fact, probably in coming weeks, because you are still in the presidency, you should give a message to all the presidents and prime ministers to say that we need to mobilize all the politicians, whatever their political background, to fight the growth of Euroscepticism and extremism.
Taoiseach.
In respect of Romania and Bulgaria, these acceded to the European Union during the Irish presidency in 2004, and we fully support their full integration into all the mechanisms of the European Union. Ireland has been a friend of Bulgaria and Romania for many years, and have engaged with them at European Council level when they've been present. In respect of democratic accountability, and the question of the citizens versus austerity, there's no doubt at all, but that every citizen across the Union has been affected by all of this. I mean, every one of your countries is affected by it. But be clear on this: we joined the European Union 40 years ago, the same day as Britain, and our membership of the European Union has transformed this country by use of the various assistances over those years from being a backward, introverted, closed economy to a country that is now open, one of the most open economies in the world. Over 1,000 multinationals here, where exports are in double digits and still booming, and where our education system has changed, where we transformed the nature of the way we do business to a point where we had been doing exceptionally well. We need to change our structures again because of the economic crisis. But in the middle of all of this, remember that the Irish were the only people who had to have a referendum by secret ballot on the Fiscal Stability Treaty. And that was endorsed 60-40 by the Irish people, showing clearly their view and their understanding of where our future is linked to, and that is to the Euro and the European Union. And I would say that, if you like, one of the consequences of the construction of our own constitution here is that over those 40 years, our people, under all governments, have engaged on a variety of referenda. So therefore the Irish electorate is very well versed in the distinctions between the Commission, the Parliament and the Council. In other words, the electorate here knows over the years the way that the Union is actually structured from that point of view. So we understand it. As far as the Troika is concerned, nobody wants to see a Troika come in the first place. But when they came here, I think it's a case again of building relationship and trust with them in order to explain that there are different ways of arriving at the same objectives. And we've actually been able to get the agreement of the Troika to change elements of the Memorandum of Understanding that was originally drawn up that are in the better interests of our people. Example, when the Troika came first, they said, if you sell any state assets, you must put all of that towards debt reduction. When you explain to the Troika that there are actually public infrastructure and employment potential arising from these things, they were able to agree on changes in the structure of the Memorandum of Understanding. So while they've been here, it's been very difficult. 190 decisions to be made by the government with the Troika, which are very difficult for people downsizing of public service, downsizing of public pay, pensions, all of these things. But it is possible to change some of these things where there's a relationship and a trust actually built up. I think it's a case of mobilising all politicians about where our future actually is headed. And for me, Europe will continue and can continue to be a critical part of global development. But it requires decisiveness, clarity, it requires horizons against which you can plan, and it means that leaders, when they make decisions, have to have the courage to follow them through. This is an enormous challenge, particularly as you look forward to the European elections next year. Our presidency has tried to be an example of how you can limit the scepticism of what Europe can actually achieve. And we hope that our country and its people, when we emerge from this programme later this year, can be an example to any others that where you are prepared as government and people working together to roll up the sleeves, make the decisions to deal with the problem and the scale of the problem, and having dealt with adversity in the past, we do so again here now. So I've never believed, of course, you can't either tax your way to prosperity or have prosperity through continuous austerity. There has to be a balance here of getting your fiscal discipline right, but at the same time pumping what you can into opportunity to open the doors where employment can be created and where careers can follow. For any politician, at the end of the day, it is about men and women being able to go to work in the morning, to have an income, to have a career, to be able to build their lives and their families and their futures in their own countries if that's what they wish to do. And if that's not what they wish to do, that they be able to travel to other countries with the confidence and the education that will allow them to stand on any platform with their peers. I see an enormous future here for Europe, and it's all about confidence, and politicians should not be negative, should not become disillusioned, because it is about making decisions that affect the problems that we face. And these are enormous challenges, but it's one where the high ground beckons up ahead.
Thank you, Taoiseach. The next contributor is from Cyprus, Ms. Athena Kyriakitou.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, can citizens of the EU trust European institutions, or do you think they're put off by the heavy austerity measures being imposed to them? And do you really believe that the EU's budget for 2014 to 2020 is sufficient so that we can restore growth and bring back jobs? What is your vision of true solidarity among EU member states? Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Carlo Cassini from the European Parliament.
Thank you, Chairman. If you talk about the budget, you talk about the future. If we take a look, if we look enough forward to the future, you can be optimistic. With an eye on the next European elections, of course, that these elections will have a significant impact on the future of Europe. Europe got the Nobel Peace Prize for what it's done in the past. That's quite clear. What will be known for the future was outlined by President Barroso recently when he talked about a federation of nation states, when he referred to that. Here, now, today, however, as a representative of the European Parliament, I would ask for convincing guarantees under the budget. We don't want to have any more debts. We need to have a review clause for the budget for 2016. We need to establish flexibility in expenditures so that you can have carryover. And finally, we want to have a clear timetable to look at a new autonomous financing for the European budget. I'm talking about own resources. Thank you very much to the Irish Presidency.
From Belgium, Ms. Christiana Vienne.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier Ministre.
Thank you, Taoiseach. How can we strengthen the role of European and national parliamentarians, in particular in budgetary terms? Because there is less and less room for maneuver in political terms. Now, you have said that the austerity policy has reached and shown its limits. We if we want to involve young people and European citizens, we need a vigorous policy through the Pact for Growth and Jobs. Thank you.
From Spain is Mr. Diego Lopez.
Gracias. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask the Taoiseach about the position that the presidency is going to be maintaining at the upcoming summit on youth employment, and more specifically, if he considers that employment programs under Erasmus and professional guidance need to be extended, and whether there ought to be more funding apart from the $6 billion that's been set aside. It's clearly insufficient to tackle unemployment, which is 1 in 4 of young people. We can use the European Investment Bank or the Social Fund. Now, you have said in what you said earlier that we need the citizens to believe in us, and if we don't make progress on youth unemployment, they won't.
Very much. The next speaker from Germany is Mr. Peter Friedrich.
Ja, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Taoiseach, I'd also like to very much thank you with the very committed Irish presidency. I'm interested in the topic of national budgets. With the fiscal pact, we now have common rules for the expenditure side, but I'd be interested to hear your view on common rules for the revenue side of the balance sheet. In particular, the issue of tax harmonization in Europe. We still have very different tax regimes across Europe, and we know that millions, if not billions or more, can get lost because of the various tax systems. Now, I know that there is a push for some harmonization on corporate tax, for example, the financial transaction tax, and other possible taxes. So efforts are being made to ensure that the European Union has sufficient financing to carry out its tasks.
Vincenzo Dana. Okay, we'll move on. The next speaker will be Mr. Ruben Moreno from Spain.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think all countries, including Spain, have made a great effort on their budgets and introducing structural reforms for growth and employment, and that's necessary if we're going to have sustainable growth in the future. But there are 2 fundamental problems currently facing Europe. One of them is youth unemployment, and the other is how to finance the economy. In other words, restore normal activity and normal lending. It just makes no sense at all, and it's unacceptable that within the single market, companies have completely different levels of access to funding. And so I'd like to ask the Taoiseach that any measures agreed in the Council have to be taken urgently. We've got to act quickly. We've got to act now, and citizens are expecting responses now.
Colleagues, we have time for just 2 more questions, and the first of them will be Mr. Günther Krischbaum from Germany, followed by Mr. Mehmet Tekelioglu from Turkey. So, Günther.
Vielen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender.
Thank you very much, Chairman Dominic Taoiseach. First of all, we'd warmly like to thank you for the very committed Irish presidency that we've had, both committed and friendly, and that's something which I personally very much appreciate. Taoiseach, I'd be very interested to hear how you view current events in Turkey, because I think it's crucial that in a state where you have the rule of law, you have the rule of the majority, but also what's crucial is how the majority deals with minorities and democratic rights and participation rights, and how those rights are respected. My second question, we now want to negotiate a free trade agreement with the United States of America, so the EU-USA free trade agreement. Could you perhaps in a few sentences sketch out what that would mean for Ireland specifically? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the final questioner will be Mr. Mehmet Takelioglu from Turkey.
Thank you. In the days that the whole world is going through economic crisis, we want to see a bright future for the EU. We believe that the EU needs a more rapid decision-making processes. To compete with the emerging Asian economy, planned free trade agreement with the United States of America is important. However, we do not want the EU to forget old friends. In addition, we look forward to more concrete measures to combat against discrimination, Islamophobia and xenophobia. There is no change in the vision of Turkey's EU membership. We will be participating in an important delegation in Brussels on Wednesday for the opening ceremony of the Chapter 22. We would like to thank Ireland for their support in the opening of Chapter 22. Thank you.
Taoiseach, please respond, and also if you could maybe give us some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Deputy Hannigan, Chairman. Cyprus, is the MFF, is it enough? Always the question. It's never enough, is it? This is a massive amount of money, 960 billion. It's a good start, I think. I think the more important issue here is decide to implement the budget and have the monies that are allocated to the different sectors allocated so that people can start actually making a difference. In regard, what's my vision for the of true solidarity? It is a case that the founding principles of the common market and later the European Union were that big countries would work with small countries for the development of for the association and development of everybody. 60 million slaughtered in 2 world wars, reason for being set up in the first place. I like to think that we're an example here in this country over 40 years of having used the cooperation and the assistance of our European colleagues to transform this country, as I said, from being a backward, infrastructurally poor country to one which is, for its size, making a really serious effort in a global world which is changing at bewildering speed. A revision clause for the MFF, yes, I met with President Schulz and President Barroso now on a number of occasions. My Deputy Prime Minister, the Taoiseach, has been leading the discussions with Mr. Lamassoure. We have always supported the question of a review clause for the MFF with flexibility. Who knows what the states of the economies will be in 2017, 2018. It's only right and proper that we should look at these things. We've also been very clear with the Presidency in respect of the question of unity and flexibility and own resources in these areas. You talk about the review clause and the unity of the budget. Young people, 6 billion. Obviously, this is an insufficient fund, but it's much better to have 6 billion in there than not to have 6 billion in there, and much better to be talking about front-loading it than not have any fund at all. I think the challenge for the politicians and for the parliamentarians is to get best practice in any country. What are the most effective programmes that you can have? If when the MFF is agreed, hopefully this week, and country X says we now have access to whatever number of hundreds of millions for youth unemployment, do you know what you're going to do with it? Have you got your programmes ready? Will they be in place to be effective on the 1st of January 2014? How many times have we seen in Europe over the years where very significant sums of money were not spent in the way they should be? So here is an opportunity now for all countries who have a real problem with youth unemployment to put in place their programmes that can be effective so that when the monies come on stream, they're going to be spent in the right way. We have a 29% youth unemployment rate in this country in different regions. On my way back from Hungary, I called into Austria, speaking to Chancellor there. We went to look at a number of youth engagements. And because of the youth guarantee and the way they structure it, in Austria, for instance, for people who leave the formal education system, the rate of unemployment among young people is of the order of 3 or 4%. We can all learn from each other. One size doesn't fit all here, but there is a 6 billion fund, and it should be used for young people in that sense. National budgets. Let me confirm to you that at the G8 last week, and the question of tax avoidance, tax fraud, tax transparency. All of these issues were discussed in a working group with the G8, Europe, OECD, World Bank, leaders from Africa and so on. There's no question of a requirement for tax harmonisation. The start of this presidency, the first meeting of ECOFIN, the Minister for Finance allowed through the agenda the question of the financial transaction tax. Ireland does not support that because of our proximity to the City of London, and yet we allowed that to go through for enhanced cooperation for countries that want to be involved in it. So, insofar as the question of tax issues are concerned, the big priority now of the European Council is to put in place a new international code for the sharing of information here and for dealing with the different elements that apply in different jurisdictions for companies who work in so many countries. Because the reality is that legislation has not moved in pace with the changes that occur in the digital world. We've been very far behind here. The question from Spain is very true. I was down talking to the Spanish Prime Minister recently. The important thing is to act now. And these monies are in place. Don't leave them sitting there, that the political process can actually prove to its citizens that decisions made are decisions that can be implemented and that are designed to help the people, because that's what the political process is about, providing the opportunity for the environment where people can get on with their lives. The question from Belgium, about the Compact for Jobs and Growth. It's a very significant element. We think that it when it's implemented effectively, will make a difference. I've spoken about youth unemployment, the Erasmus programme. It's a good start, but I'd like to see it get on. In respect of tax, you have the FTT. We've worked on the presidency in regard to CCCTB. These are very complex issues, and I think that's probably a very long-term argument that's going to take place. In respect of Turkey, we support Turkey beginning accession. This is a long process. But I think it should be made very clear that across Europe, we don't want to see a situation like we witnessed on our television screens. You need to have stability in a country for progress to be made for its citizens, and that's why there's a need for political reflection to bring a period and a sense of calmness into the situation that applies in Turkey. The prospect of EU membership is a stability issue. And is a stabilising factor. I think it's one that should be fed in for the citizens can see the opportunity that does arise when a country works well in the context of its overall European membership, and that's one that we support. I forgot to say that I was down in Greece recently speaking to the Prime Minister about the question of the Troika, and this has been very difficult in the situation that has applied in Greece. But they were anxious to learn from a country like Ireland, which was one of the first into a programme. And while it's very difficult to do these things, working between government and people, it is a case of where we would like to be an example of a small country that actually emerges from a programme and that can see a period of growth and prosperity up ahead. So I wish you success for your remaining deliberations. As a committed person to the concept of the development of the European Union, we should never waste our days, and the decisions that are made politically have to be seen to be implemented in the interest of all our citizens. Because when you go through all of the countries, and I've been from Portugal, Spain, to France, to Italy, to Hungary, to Lithuania, to Latvia, to Finland, to Great Britain, Northern Ireland, all of these countries have their own individual problems, and yet there's a genuineness about the European Union that if we harness it properly will really bring the entire Union up, and that's where we have tried to focus on this presidency, working with all our colleagues to make the decisions that are set out with the intention of improving the situation in Europe. I hope those reflections go in some way, Dominic, to giving your colleagues here a flavour of what we've been at for the last 6 months.
we will actually have to conclude the debate there. So apologies to the small number of people who didn't manage to get in. But I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking the Taoiseach for taking part in this excellent debate this morning. Thanks. Colleagues, it's now time for a break. We're going to have coffee outside, but before you take your coffee, can I ask you that you join with me in the traditional family photo, which will take place just outside in the foyer. We're due back in this room at 11:45, so thank you very much.